Hey everyone, welcome back to the YMyHealth Podcast. It's your co-host Melissa Schenkman here, and we're going to be continuing in our mental health series this month with a topic that you hear about a lot, but maybe doesn't exactly come up in conversation as much as it should, and that is suicide. And that is something that is affecting the millennial generation. In fact, the latest numbers on that are that it's the fourth leading cause of death for people between the ages of 35 and 40, and that's pretty large amount of the millennial generation. And so we're very fortunate to have Eileen Chapman here with us on the podcast. She is a senior suicide prevention specialist at the Wounded Warrior Project and is going to teach us a lot in this episode about how we can take part in suicide prevention. Both with her experience, obviously in the military level and talking with people in the military, but also those things that resonate very much and can be applied to those of us in the civilian. We're so fortunate to have Eileen Chapman here with us. She is the Senior Suicide Prevention Specialist at the Wounded Warrior Project, and she's going to be talking with us about how we can all play a role in suicide prevention, whether you're on the military side or the civilian side. There are lots of parallels. So welcome to the podcast, Eileen.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, we're very excited to have you. To start, I just kind of wanted to find out, and I know our community will as well, kind of what led you to get involved in the work at Wounded Warrior Project and specifically in the area of suicide prevention.
Well, sure. As I think a lot of us can relate to, generationally, 9/11 happened while I was in high school.
Yeah.
And so I think our huge influx of peers kind of enlisting or joining the military after school, after college, was pretty big, pretty high for our generation of folks.
Yeah.
I think I was a freshman when 9/11 happened. So just kind of slowly watching folks trickle into the military. Coincidentally, Wounded Warrior Project came to be as a result of that conflict after 9/11. So kind of around the same time frame, I'm watching friends and loved ones joining the military. The organization kind of got started at the same time. So through the injury and recovery of a loved one, he was one of the early recipients, I guess, of support and of care with Wounded Warrior Project. So I was able to follow the growth of the organization through his recovery.
Wow.
And watching someone recover from any sort of big injury, big illness, right? When someone is kind of in the midst of treatment or recovery, it's an incredibly helpless feeling,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It feels like there's nothing you can really do or say. You can't fix things for people. So being able to channel that desire to help, it was very appealing to join an organization that felt like a part of that solution, right? Or at least a part of
That,
the recovery process. So that's what brought me to the organization in the first place.
that's really, really interesting to hear and just to understand the trajectory
Mhm.
that it took and watching it build, I can understand that very much in the personal side of that as well. And then why specifically suicide prevention in particular?
Well, my roles at the organization have been pretty rooted in mental health. I was brought on in 2012. So in April, it'll be 14 years since I've been at the organization.
Wow.
Yeah, which is a little bit bonkers. It was my first like big girl job, and now it's turned into a pretty, you know, incredible career.
Wow.
But with roots in mental health, suicide has just kind of been woven in professionally, but then personally, that loved one ultimately did die from suicide.
I'm
So
so sorry.
when he died, it was a pretty big calling to maybe focus a little bit more intentionally
Uh-huh.
on why, right? Is there something bigger that can be done outside of that VA system of health
Sure.
that we can do to support and just make sure that the right kind of help is out there for people? And it's not black and white, right? So what works for one person isn't going to work for the next three people. So what can we do to make sure people have a million options until they find something that works, right? So that kind of personal loss really drove a sharp right turn into just focusing on suicide.
Understandably so, and I appreciate you sharing that
Yeah.
with us. Uh, in the military, we know that veterans, as they transition back
Mhm.
into civilian life, um, that's one of the time periods where suicide risk is higher. What factors make that the case, and is the risk higher? Have you found personally, if this risk is higher in people under age 50 that are in that transitional period as well?
Oh, sure. So, I mean, just think about any big transition in your life, right? Think about leaving school. Think about moving. Um, the loss that you can feel, even if it's an exciting thing, right? Two things can be true. So, with big change in our life, even when there's excitement, there's loss.
Yeah.
Um, and so, imagining that on a pretty big scale of joining the military, where that's your 24/7, that's your community, right? That's where you have a sense of belonging, of purpose, um, being a part of something, this huge identity, right? And
Mhm.
whether people are leaving the military because it's time to, it's the end of their service, whether it's retirement, again, can still be happy things. You can still be looking forward to going home and moving on with your life and being with your family, XYZ. Um, but then imagine that happening as an unplanned exit from the military, right? After an injury,
Yeah.
or an illness, after something like that happens where you might have had a plan for your life and then it was kind of taken from you.
Mm.
There's a lot of loss that happens. And in that first year after leaving service, is what's referred to in our community as the deadly gap. That's where the highest risk is in that first year after leaving the military. And that can be after 4 years of service, that can be after 35 years of service. Uh, that's the highest risk time period. And I think that that's why, right? I think community is without a doubt such a basic human need, right? We can't
Absolutely.
have that with the experiences that you might have in the military, the exposure you might have, and then just kind of being expected to go back home and carry on. That's a lot for people. I think
Yeah.
what they think it's going to affect them or not, those things catch up to you if you're not paying attention and taking care of yourself.
No, absolutely, and it's so interesting that you say that it doesn't matter how many years of service.
Hmm.
It's that transition, like you
Yeah.
said, that life transition itself is very interesting. And tell us about the suicide prevention program that you lead, um, at the Wounded Warrior Project. What are some of the different services that are offered, and how does the program combat the epidemic of suicide within the veteran population?
Sure. So, in case folks are not super familiar with Wounded Warrior Project or
Yeah.
really what it is that we do, we're a nonprofit. We serve service members, veterans who have an injury, illness, or wound that occurred on or after September 11th of 2001. So, any injury, illness, or wound that was incurred during active duty service after 9/11, you're eligible for our programs. They're all completely free of charge, accessible wherever you are, really in the world, which is pretty wild. We've got a team over in Germany. We've got folks in Hawaii. We serve in Puerto Rico. We're kind of all over the place. We have folks in Guam. So if you look for us, we're there. If we have a pool of folks who need us, but um, and another big part of that as well is making sure family members are supported, right? So if you are a family member, a caregiver um, to a service member or veteran who needs some help, that we're there for you as well. So with that in mind,
Yeah.
all of those programs are essential when we're talking about upstream prevention, right?
Mm.
For folks who like a visual, right? As
Yeah.
upstream as possible. I think that's where we have the most opportunity to catch people before we're at a place of crisis and of feeling unsupported, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, in the world of suicide prevention, we talk a lot about protective factors.
Mm.
And that's exactly like what it sounds. It's the things in your life that keep you grounded, that keep you connected. Might look a little different for everybody, but our programs are built to address those needs those protective factors. So things like physical health and mental wellness, things like sleep and pain, those are huge ones, huge indicators, right, of suicide risk.
Yeah.
Financial education, peer support, things that everybody needs. But again, when we're talking about this community specifically, it's really, really important to make sure the whole person is taken care of, right? Not just mental health. Suicide is complicated, right?
Mhm.
It's never about one thing.
Yeah.
Our brains are just not wired that way, right? It's going to
Yeah.
take a culmination of events, of factors, of environmental and historical things that can culminate in somebody getting to a place that is so dark that they
Mhm.
just do not see another way out of that pain. So mental health just is not the whole story.
Mhm.
So our approach really to suicide prevention is taking all of that into consideration. Um, we approach it as a no wrong door approach, right?
Mm.
So no
That
matter who you call, who you talk to, that person has been trained in intervention skills. So it could be maybe you're reaching out because you have some questions about the VA. And so you're talking to somebody about your disability benefits. It could be you're calling to ask about help rewriting your resume. Um, Whoever you talk to, whether they are a mental health trained person or not, they've been trained to identify cues and signs of potential suicide risk and to totally talk through an intervention, which is pretty incredible. So for anybody who works at any spot in the organization is being trained in intervention skills. So again, hopefully, when somebody reaches out for help, right, you're going to land in safe hands, no matter who you're talking to.
that's absolutely wonderful to have that many people in that many different types of positions that you wouldn't normally assume would be trained. College, that's what a phenomenal approach. Really like that very, very much. So I know you're saying that there are so many different factors that lead up to suicide and so many different areas that you could intervene to prevent it.
Mhm.
Are what being that that's the case, what are some of the different programs that you have within the suicide prevention, um, team that you guys are leading to approach some of those different factors?
Sure. So our team is unique in that we serve all of our programs with a team of 5. So our big initiatives, big rocks, if you will, are
Mhm.
training. So we have been tasked to train everybody in the organization on these intervention skills, but also we train our partners, we train grantees, we're training veterans and family support members who volunteer for us. We do a lot of peer to peer work. Because peer connection and peer support is life saving. We know that, right? Just being
Absolutely.
able to connect with somebody you speak a shared language, right? Without having to do
Yeah.
all the background work, right, of finding something to connect on. But we want to make sure that everybody who might um, come into contact with anybody that we serve, we want
Yeah.
to make sure that we have as many force multipliers out there as possible, right? So our team tackles that, right? Tackles training. We're also tackling internally our own systems. How are we being as intentional as we can and direct as we can within our existing programs when we're talking about suicide?
Sure.
And one way that we've really changed things up is that we are using a non-clinical screener, the Columbia Suicide Severity Rating Scale, lot of words,
Yeah.
um, long acronym. The most important thing is that it's a time-bound risk assessment. Are you in imminent risk right now? And if so, let's handle that, right? And what that does is tell us a couple of things. It tells us, where somebody is right now in the moment, not what's your whole history with suicide, but right now, in the last 30 days, have you had these thoughts? If so, right? Have you thought about a plan? Have you thought about taking action? Sometimes thoughts are just passive, they're fleeting, right? They might kind of come and go. You don't get as far as building a plan. For
Yeah,
some people, it feels like it sneaks up really fast and you want to act really fast. It's just different, which I think is the beauty of this specific screener,
mhm,
is that it's just asking right now, right? Because right now is what we can work with, right? All
yeah,
that history is great, but are we safe right now? So we've implemented that screener across some of our programs where we have the largest number of warriors and their families telling us that are high risk areas, right? So we have our financial education and financial readiness team. So that's emergency financial. So you could imagine if you're somebody who is dealing with extreme financial stress in your home,
absolutely.
that might be an area that could drive thoughts of suicide, right? So if you're working with that team, makes a lot of sense that we are asking, how are we today, right?
Yeah,
Let's walk through the screener. Physical health and wellness are also screening for suicide risk. Again, sleep and chronic pain are huge reported risk factors for people who
mhm,
have had thoughts of suicide. These are things that a how common is sleep disturbance, right?
yeah,
Sleep and disturbed sleep, sleep disorder, insomnia, just not good quality of sleep. These things affect your whole body, right? Your whole system of health is affected by sleep. So when we're talking mental distress, when we're talking physical and chronic pain, maybe chronic illness, and then you add a sleep problem, ooh, I mean, it's a kind of a tinderbox, right, of
yeah,
stress.
yeah,
So they're screening, and then we have our mental health team that screens as well. So we're kind of getting that information from across programs, um, very intentionally, knowing that those programs are where people might go when they're dealing with some pretty high stress. So screening has been a huge tool that we've implemented in the last couple of years. And it's telling us a lot of pretty important information. And the plan is to expand that to all of our programs, but you got to start somewhere. So um,
absolutely.
we're starting with the big
That
three.
that's wonderful because, again, areas that you wouldn't expect it, that somebody would be screened with that, but you could absolutely catch these things because, as you said, there's so many factors that
Yeah.
play into this. So,
Mhm.
brilliant.
Every single time, 100% of the time, we have to remember we're not experts in everything. Right?
Yeah,
It is so important to ask questions of the people who live and work in these communities. What is your experience?
mm,
How do you talk about suicide, or how do you do this, whatever this is, right? In your
yeah,
community, because those are the real experts, right? And then you can just have a conversation.
yeah,
So you're building trust, you're involving those people that are in front of you, and then we're learning from each other, right? And those unique experiences kind of as we travel. So um, that's what we have found so far is just humility. Make sure we're bringing good, good stewards of that community, and then ask a lot of questions. Yeah.
no, that's very, very interesting to hear, very insightful. And I'm curious in terms of, on the US side, in terms of different states, do you see some differences between different regions that you all have kind of talked about after going and speaking that at all? Or what about in the United States versus internationally when you've gone over internationally? Any like big differences that have ever come from that?
I think that with the military community, everybody's very transient, right? So you can be speaking to a group of people in Georgia,
Mhm.
um, but most of the people who are in front of you are not from there, right? Transplants,
True.
especially if we're
True.
talking active duty, right?
Sure.
We have a lot of folks in Texas who, when they leave the military, if they're leaving in Texas, they'll stay.
Oh,
We have
interesting.
great state benefits for veterans who want to, buy a home, have some land. And so people tend to want to settle in places like that, right? Where they can make the most
Yeah.
of their benefits.
Yeah.
Um, so I think that that's part of it, is kind of remembering that people are a little bit scattered from all over the place, which
Yeah.
is asking questions is huge.
Yeah.
You don't
Yeah.
ever want to like accidentally talk at somebody about something that they know way more about than you do.
True.
Um, With the military, we also do a bit of training with first responders and law enforcement. A lot
Oh,
of
cool.
veterans move into those roles after service. Um,
Yeah.
just to, again, continue serving just in a different capacity if they want to
Yeah.
go in that direction. So um, we talk about lethal means and firearm safety quite a bit. We know that nothing gets better if we're not willing to talk about it, and not talking about lethal means and not talking about what safe access looks like isn't
Mhm.
helping anybody. So you kind of have to face those conversations head on. Um, that is regionally different for sure, I think. Just, you know, culturally, there are some differences there. But again, with how transient the community is with the military, I think we're just careful to have the same messaging wherever we go, and that's safe
Mm.
access needs to be first and foremost in any conversation about lethal means, whether we're talking about firearms, medications, whatever it is, that could keep people in a place of safety, right? When we're going through any sort of crisis. So confronting those things head on, kind of regardless of where we are, the messaging is the same. So.
That makes absolute sense. So your team travels to so many different places in the United States. It travels to other countries. I know you were recently in Germany. How do you go about preparing for giving these talks to people in so many different locations who are from so many different places and may have different cultural norms where they are or that they're bringing to the table that they're with? What you said about everything that you do to prepare is extremely insightful, extremely interesting, and I can see how that helps to apply the talks and the tools for suicide prevention to people in so many different spots. What about addressing any stigma around seeking help and mental health treatment in the military at large, and then in the veteran population as well?
Sure. We make it a point over and over and over to say this problem isn't going away if we're not willing to talk about it. Ignoring it, keeping it quiet, pretending like everything's okay for the sake of other people, right? Or being
Yeah.
fearful of perception or fearful of consequences, right? Whether they're
Yeah.
intended or unintended, um, it doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
Like we
Yeah.
know that. So we say that quite often, right? It might be uncomfortable to talk about this, but we need to.
Yeah.
Um, we also have found that even though it doesn't get easier to be vulnerable and to kind of share your own stuff, because it is real and it's so personal for so many of us, right?
Yes.
But
Yes.
it helps. It helps to kind of share your own story of suicide and to share how critically important it was to reach out for support and
Yeah.
to emphasize that reaching out once is most of the time not going to be enough, right? You have
Mm,
to
yeah.
stay on it, stay on top of your own mental health and your own wellness. Um, there's just not a quick solution to any of this. So reaching out once isn't it. So I think reinforcing the idea of we have to talk about it, we have to share, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
then we have to make sure people know where to go for help because it's so difficult on your own. Um,
Yes.
to sort through options and to try to look into reviews of this place or that place. There's an overwhelming amount of information out there. So people need to have more than one option, but they certainly don't need like a 3-page PDF of resources that they're pulling from a website. It's overwhelming. Um,
Absolutely.
on a good day, I don't want to go through that. So on a bad day, I'm definitely not going to do that. You know what I mean? So
100%. Yeah.
yeah.
Less
So
barriers and the less complicated, the better.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we also like over and over and over, we want to drive home the importance of peer connection, right? Of checking on your
Absolutely.
friends, of checking on your friends intentionally, right? And be willing to have tough conversations.
Yeah. Absolutely. And speaking of that, while the number of US military veterans impacted by suicide is far higher than civilians, I know suicide rates have been approximately 72% higher in veterans, in terms of having suicidal thoughts and behavior. Um, it's something that impacts the millennial age group outside of the military as well. A lot of people our age are really just starting to feel comfortable opening up about their mental health to their friends, not only in a therapy setting, but to their friends and their loved
Mhm.
ones. But some just aren't quite sure how to really approach that topic with others or even respond when their friends or loved ones may be struggling and they see that. And so, how can we talk about suicide safely?
Yeah. Um, to your point, I think millennials have opened up the conversation about mental health in a really important way. I think culturally, we're at a point where we aren't determined to just push things down
Yeah.
and hope that it goes away, right? That's never worked. We can look at generations before us and say, ooh, I know that in the moment that felt like the right thing to do, but I can see where that might not have been a good move for you. I can see where getting some support and getting some help would have been really, really good for this person.
Yeah.
Um, but it's just taken time. I think it's taken time and it's taken, uh, being honest with ourselves and each other that that's just not a strategy that's going to be effective for anybody. So, uh, I know that when friends of mine start opening up and talking about their therapist, right, or something that they learned from therapy, I'm going to feel 1,000% more comfortable to say, like, okay, well, let me tell you what my therapist said yesterday, right?
Yeah.
Or last week or whatever. These conversations are so important. And it's a huge relief to say, like, okay, it's not just me, right? We
Yeah.
need to be able to connect with other people about these experiences of mental health, of therapy. We can refer people to treatment programs or clinical care all day long. But when somebody comes back and says, like, okay, I just went through this program, let me tell you what it was like, I'm locked in. I'm going to learn so much more from listening to somebody's real life experience that I'm going to learn anywhere else.
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. And if we find that a friend or family member is struggling, how should we respond? Now that we're very mental health aware, like you said, in this
Mhm.
generation, but if we find ourselves where we're seeing this,
Uh-huh.
what are those first steps that we should take?
Approach a conversation with curiosity, with compassion, and without judgment. Um, be open to answers and information that you might not have assumed that you
Mm,
would hear, right? No matter how well you know somebody, you don't know everything that goes on in their heads, right? So we
yeah.
have to be really, really careful with our assumptions. Um, we've got to be super direct and then we have to really listen. We have to be really good listeners, even if the temptation is to want to give advice, right? Or to
Yeah.
convince somebody of how much they have going for them or how smart they are or how much X, Y, and Z needs them and loves them and things like that. It's not helpful.
Mm,
I mean, imagine when you're having a terrible, awful day, right? Or season of life. Um, and you're upset about something and you just need somebody to hear you. Uh, take that and multiply it by 15, right? For somebody who might be struggling with thoughts of suicide.
yeah.
And you can imagine how important it is to have somebody listen and say, that is a lot. You are carrying so much. Of course, that feels this heavy, right? I can't imagine how heavy that is for you to carry, right? We need to hear those things on a bad day. We need to hear them even more when we're at a place of legitimately thinking life or death.
Yeah.
Um, we have to let people talk. We have to avoid advice giving. Um, we just need to listen.
That's incredibly powerful and helpful advice for everyone. I really appreciate you sharing that with us.
Yeah.
For sure. And, how can some of the lessons that you teach in the Wounded Warrior Project's suicide prevention program be applied to millennials in the civilian world, whose risk factors include things such as, you know, burnout from work?
Mm.
So many people are dealing with that these days, and career pressure, social isolation, social media, um, and stress, all which can really lead to struggling with identity and purpose, and something that even, active duty military members are also facing when transitioning to civilian life. What are some lessons for all of us?
Of course. I mean, we talk a lot about self-care, and self-regulation, and self-care can be a little eye-rolly, right? I
Mhm.
think
Yeah.
it's turned into, inspirational quotes on Instagram. But look, there's a lot of science behind how important it is to keep ourselves regulated.
Yeah.
Um, and we do that by intentional acts of self-care. You don't have to call it that. Whatever, whatever feels right to you. The
Sure.
goal is to keep ourselves regulated so that we can respond to stress, right? Stress is not an if, it's a when, it's constant. It's big stuff, it's little stuff. If there is nothing in the tank to help us respond rationally, to respond in a way that we're not going to be, you know, upset about later in a way we can be proud of, that doesn't happen on accident, right?
Yeah.
We have to focus on sleep. We have to focus on healthy movement. We have to focus
Mhm.
on what we eat. Get some fresh air, some non-screen activities, some non-screen communication. So the goal really with keeping our bodies regulated, keeping ourselves regulated is
Yeah.
imagine it's small things often, right?
Yeah.
It's not wait until you are at a breaking point. Wait until you're so burnt out that
Yeah.
you are sick and you have to take PTO sick days. Don't wait for that, right? Small things often is the only way that we're going to have any sort of day-to-day outcome, let alone long-term outcomes. We're talking about quality of life, right?
Yeah.
Um, and again, that doesn't happen on accident either. You deserve to have a great quality of life. So you deserve to kind of pour back into yourself a little bit. And that's really the only way we have a chance at combating some of this stuff, is putting those needs as forward in our brains as we can.
Yeah. It's a really great way to frame it and for all of us to think about it. And it is quality of life. You're 100% right there. And why is it important to bring suicide into the conversation about mental health? Because we're having
Mhm.
conversations about mental health, but that is not always a part of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, suicide doesn't discriminate, right? It doesn't just exist in the military or in the veteran space or in one part of the world. I mean, it's everywhere. It's everywhere. It's every community, right?
Yeah.
You've probably heard the saying like check on your happy friends, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't look like one thing. Uh, Nothing changes if we're not going to talk about it openly and honestly, and unless people know that they're not alone with these thoughts, right?
Yeah.
You are not broken. You are not failing. There's nothing wrong with you. Um, we have to look at suicide holistically. So mental health does play a big part, um, in a lot of things, right? Talking again about whole person, whole body wellness. Mental health is a big part of that. Our sleep is going to be messed up if our mental health is messed up. Our eating is going to be messed up if our mental health. All of those things, it's a chicken or the egg for a lot of these things, right?
Yeah.
But if one thing is thrown off its trajectory, the rest start to follow.
Yeah.
And it's hard to get back on track. So we have to take care of our mental health the same way we're taking care of our physical health. So whatever feels easier for you. I think a lot of people, it's easier for people to talk about physical health and exercise than it is to talk
Yeah.
about doing those things for our brains as well. Um, but it's essential. So if we're talking about mental health without asking about suicide, or at least talking about suicide, we're
Mm.
missing a pretty big opportunity. Again, with that whole idea of getting upstream, right? We're not going to catch people early enough if we're not willing to ask the questions early enough, even if somebody on the surface looks like they're doing just fine, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to come out of left field, right? If we're really listening to people and we're listening for cues, I think because suicide is scary. It's an intimidating topic. It's one thing to listen to, to you and I talk about it. It's another thing to look in the face
Absolutely.
of somebody that you love and ask them this question, right?
Yes.
Um, but it's also life-saving to do that. As scary and as intimidating as that is, uh, we have to be able to kind of wrap our head around the importance of being super direct. Um, yeah.
No, absolutely, absolutely no, and it's sometimes the toughest conversations are the ones that save the lives. Save
1,000%.
lives.
We
No,
get we get really great feedback, sometimes just anecdotal feedback after we do some trainings, and we like to write them down as a team so that when we're having some frustrating days or things just feel more heavy than normal, um, we have somewhere where some of this feedback sits and you can kind of remind yourself of like, that's right.
yeah,
The outcome here is that this person felt more confident in approaching a person in their life, and asking about suicide. Nobody is ever perfect, in these conversations. You also don't need to be, right? Um, if you're seeking perfection, then you can't go to a human being, right? That's a robot. People are going to come to you because they trust you. People are going to come to you because you have a warmth or a compassion or a style of conversation that they need. Right. And
yeah,
we're going to seek those people out on bad days, or we're going to seek those people out when we really need to have a harder conversation. Uh, so it's really, really special when people reach back out after a workshop, because these are 2-day classes. That's intense, right? It's an
yeah.
intense 2 days, and reach back out and say, I really hoped I would never have to use this, but
Mhm.
I just did. It went okay. I felt like I had a little bit more of an idea of what to do, and that person is safe. Um, it's the best possible outcome, right?
Absolutely, absolutely, and it just shows how valuable your work is and your team's work is in making a difference. Thank you so much, Eileen, for sharing such incredible insights with us on a very difficult topic, very complex topic, and giving us actual tools and steps that we can take um, in how we're thinking about this, how we can approach it as we see other people struggling, and empower us to intervene and to get people help, but also be part of getting that help, getting to that place of getting help as well. As we wrap up today's episode, how can people get in touch with the Wounded Warrior Project,
Yeah.
with you, and also is there anything you'd like to plug that is coming up for your team?
Well, not necessarily a plug, just kind of a
Sure.
reminder that, without a doubt, there's no one institution or organization that can be all things to all people, right? We
Yeah.
have to collaborate as a community. You have to have community partners. You have to use a VA in this, long-term system of health for people. The more support, the more collaboration, the better. It's not about any one place looking for credit. It's about making sure people, have what they need, right? And have access to getting what they need.
Yeah.
So I would just say if you are a military connected person, whether that is a spouse or a family member of a service member or veteran, if you're a veteran, military member yourself, we're here. Everything we do is free of charge. And whether it's for you or whether it's for somebody in your life,
Yeah.
reach out, right? Connect and just see what's out there. Because you never know. And then if you aren't necessarily in that category, but you just want to learn more, or you're interested in support in any way, you can go to the same place. So it's just woundedwarriorproject.org. Um, and then from there, you can learn how to get in touch, learn how to get involved, all of that great stuff all in one place.
Wonderful. That's very helpful, and we'll put that information in the show notes as well for people, um, to reach out. And any final thoughts as we go, to share with people on suicide prevention that you would like them to take away from this
Um,
episode?
yeah, I in I think the best possible outcome here of just having a platform to talk about suicide prevention is remembering that um, there's no one way to do this, right? It would be easier if there was. But
Or
there's not one right way to do this. Just be who you are, and you never know the impact that you're going to have on somebody by being a good listener, by being kind, by being available. Um, but you also have to take care of yourself, right?
yeah.
Um, so I'd say take care of yourself, take care of the people around you, and period.
Perfect. Well, excellent, excellent words and thoughts to end on.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Eileen, so much for coming and joining us on the podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. It was an amazing opportunity to talk about this. I know it's a rough topic. It's a rough topic to talk about and to kind of sit in for a little while.
Yep.
So if this was rough for you and you need to go get some fresh air and step outside, take care of yourself. And thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. And absolutely, I second that advice, but I'm so glad that we were able to have this conversation and it'll help so many people. So
Awesome.
thank you.
Thank you.